Hello, I'd like to talk a little bit about why I went with a plug-in hybrid. When you go to electric vehicles, there's basically three kinds. There's a pure hybrid, or the standard hybrid, sometimes it's called HEV, plug-in hybrid, PHEV, and all-electric EV. And I'll start with the two hybrids first. The difference between a plug-in hybrid and a regular hybrid basically is that the plug-in hybrid has a slightly bigger battery. The standard hybrid has a small battery which is only charged when you go down hills or brake or coast, and it runs completely off the gas engine, and the battery and the electric motor are just there to give you a little bit extra economy. But you never plug it in, and it never really runs on electric more than, I don't know, a couple hundred feet maybe at most, because it never gets a really huge charge usually. And the batteries, like I said, it's usually like maybe around, say, like 1 kilowatt hour. This has a 8.9 kilowatt hour battery in it, which it's rated at 26 miles electric only. But we drove it to Bainbridge and back a couple days ago or last week, and we drove 31 miles, and we still had a little bit of battery power left when we got home. So we had more than 31 miles, although the engine did. I'll talk a little bit later about when the engine kicks on. But so the plug-in hybrid then has that advantage. For short trips around town, you can just use electric only, and you don't need to ever really put gas in the car unless you're going on a long trip and you need the extra range. So in my mind, there's no reason to get a standard hybrid. The only disadvantage is you're paying a slight amount more for the slightly larger battery, and if you never used that, in other words, if you lived like in an apartment and you had no way to charge your car at home, no electrical outlets, and let's say you commuted to work and you worked at a place where there was no way to charge, so you would never get to charge, then yeah, a standard hybrid might make perfect sense for you. But for those of us that can charge at home, the plug-in hybrid is the way to go. The electric vehicle then has an even larger battery and no gas motor. And right now, the reason I didn't go straight electric right now is because in the same model, for example, the straight electric is $10,000 more than the plug-in hybrid version. And the pure electric would have like a, I don't know, 70, 80 kilowatt hour battery. So let's talk a little bit about charging. There's two basic types of charging, AC and DC. As you probably know, let me get this unhooked here. I've installed a hook so I can hook this up. As you probably know, your home outlet is AC power. 110 volt is the standard here in the U.S. And batteries, however, are DC and only take a DC charge. So if you're charging a battery or recharging a battery, you need to have an inverter that converts the AC to the DC. So for the AC, this is the one that comes with the car, and this is a stage 1 charger, and I'll talk about the stage 1 or the stage 2 in a minute. This has the plugs, and it plugs directly into the car and latches, and then it plugs directly into the outlet on the house, 110. And that is what I call stage 1 charging, 110 volt. What the Kia manual calls it trickle charging, I guess to avoid confusion. So instead of stage 1 and stage 2, they call it trickle and standard. And stage 2 charging is 220 volt. So to charge with a stage 2 charger at home, you need to have an outlet that's at 220. That's the kind of outlet you might have for some appliance that takes a lot of electricity, like maybe an electric stove or something like that would maybe have that kind of. So what you probably would need to do is have an electrician come and install a 220 outlet, outside or in your garage or whatever, wherever you're going to have your car parked. Now, charging times with this car at 8.9 kilowatt hours, a charging time, a full charge with a standard 110 volt stage 1 charger is about 7 hours or so, 7, 8 hours. So comfortably overnight. It can do a full recharge. It's less than that. Usually when I come home from driving it around this last week or two, it'll charge in 3 or 4 hours because I haven't used all the battery, just going around town and stuff. With a stage 2 charger, it should charge in somewhere between like an hour and a half to 2.5 hours, 2 hour type range for a full charge. Now the hybrids don't use the DC chargers. Now there's a third. So when you go out to a commercial charger, like at your grocery store or at your parking lot or any place there is a commercial charger, there's two kinds. The AC chargers, and those are usually the stage 2 chargers, and then they have what they call DC fast charges, and those are for cars that are pure electric cars, because when you're trying to use a stage 2 charger on a pure electric car, it'll charge this thing in an hour and a half, but a pure electric car might take overnight, 6 or 7 hours. And if you're on a long trip on the highway with an electric car, you don't want to have that lengthy recharge. So what they have is these DC chargers that have a really high voltage. So in the car behind me, the battery pack is in the back underneath, the lithium batteries, and they are air cooled. And the faster you charge a battery, the more heat, the warmer the battery might get. And so with a stage 2 charger, these batteries, the air cool is plenty good and it's fine. If we tried to charge them any faster, like this isn't wired for that, but if we did try to pump DC fast charge into this, the batteries would overheat. And so you don't do that. What they do then for an electric vehicle, let me come back to the AC for a second. In the AC vehicle chargers, unplug this. The inverter is actually in the car. The box here, and this is the standard plug. This is the one that came with the Kia. It's a stage 1 charger, what I call stage 1. So plug for a 110 volt outlet. Has a box here that has some display lights that light up that show you what's going on, whether it's charging or not, and if there's any warnings or anything like that shows up here. But this is just basically a switch, and what this thing does is it sits here and waits, and the car sends it a signal that says, okay, I'm ready, send me electricity, and it turns on. And when the car is done charging, it sends a message that says, hey, I'm done, stop. Or if there's an error message, it sends an error message, like if there's a short or something, it would send an error message to this to say stop, or an overload situation or something. So the inverter is in the car, and you're pumping AC into the car. With the DC fast chargers, the inverter is actually in the station, not in the car, it's in the station. And that's because those DC fast chargers have such a high voltage. The inverter is so big, heavy, and expensive that you don't want it in a car. You don't want it in the car for 2 reasons. One is weight. You don't want to make your car real super heavy. And then secondly, the cost. You want to keep the cost of the car down, and it makes a lot of sense to have that in the charger where lots of people can use the same charger, so that one DC inverter is being used by many people rather than having just one person have to pay for it to haul it around in their car and hurt their mileage. So that's why the DC plug is slightly different. This is a standard plug. Tesla has their own. They came out with one that's different, and so there are some different plugs. But this is a standard plug that fits almost everything. The DC version of the same plug has 2 big extra connections for the DC power, so you can tell at a glance whether it's an AC or a DC plug. So why didn't I get the electric car? Well, cost, and also, I don't know about availability of the fast chargers around here yet. There are some, and they're undoubtedly going to be putting in more. There are a number of the stage 2 chargers around. So I thought, well, for now, we'll go with a cheaper alternative. We'll go with a plug-in hybrid, and I'll just, do the best I can with that. And like I said, it hardly ever runs. The engine will run when you first turn the car on and the weather's cold. the gas engine will come on just to warm the vehicle up, to warm both the interior heating as well as the engine itself. It wants to, the computer wants to have the engine warm so that when you do need it, it'll kick in. So for example, if I'm on electric driving and I'm going down the highway and I start trying to accelerate up a hill, the gas engine will come on to boost the power, and it wants to have that available, instantly. It'll just switch on. You won't even hardly notice it when you're driving the car. It'll just switch on instantly because the engine's already warmed up. It's not going from cold to high RPM instantly. It's going from warm to high RPM. Then once the engine's warm, then it'll shut down. While the engine's running, it will also be charging the battery, so you get a little bit of that, energy back that you're buying with your gasoline. But I've been getting, the last couple trips I made, I'm getting like over 200 miles per gallon. I'm getting 120, 140 miles per gallon overall because I'm doing mostly electric, which is very little gas, enough to warm the car, turn on the heat, and also enough to, accelerate up a hill. I'm going to go in the back and show you something else here. This is the key fob, and you can see you've got the basic lock, unlock, horn. There's a valet key, physical key inside of here. But if you have the key fob in your pocket, and you do a single click on the door here, it'll open the driver's door. And if you do a double click, now I did a single click and it'll lock, single click, driver's door, and the passenger door should still be locked. It is. Second click, and all the doors are unlocked. And that's the default. You can change it. You can change that in the settings to do different things, but that's how it comes default. So the car does have a 12 volt. The lithium batteries have a very high voltage, and the reason the car has a little 12 volt battery here is to run the interior stuff. So like the lighting in the cab and the radio and the fan and things like that normally run on 12 volt DC. You can run from this little battery, which gets recharged from the lithium or from the gas engine. But and you don't have to run those low voltage applications from some really super high voltage coming out of the lithium. Then you'd have to run a high voltage cable through the car, or you'd have to step it down and waste a lot of that energy with heat. So they have this little battery, but this battery is small because it doesn't ever have to start the car. It doesn't. There's no 12 volt starter engine in this car. The lithium batteries start the engine. So if you to crank the engine over to get the gas motor running, it uses the power from the lithium, not from the 12 volt. And if you ever did need to actually, if the lithium batteries were completely, absolutely, totally dead, and you weren't at a charging station, and you had to jump it to get there, there's a connection port under the hood in front that you use to connect to a jumper cable or to an external battery pack.